For over 100 years, the fingerprint was considered the gold standard of forensic proof, unique to every person, unchanging for life. In courtrooms, an examiner testifying this print is a match was treated as close to unimpeachable fact. In 2004, 3 FBI fingerprint examiners, not one, 3, looked at a print from a terrorist bombing in Madrid and identified it as belonging to an American lawyer in Oregon who had never left the country. They were wrong, all of them. And the story of how that happened isn't really about fingerprints at all. It's about what happens inside an expert's mind once they've already decided they've found their answer. On March 11, 2004, a series of bombs on commuter trains in Madrid killed 191 people. In the investigation that followed, Spanish police recovered a plastic bag near the scene containing detonators, and on that bag, a partial fingerprint. Spanish authorities sent a digital scan of the print to the FBI, along with other international agencies, as part of a routine search for a match. The FBI ran it through its automated fingerprint database, which returned a list of candidates, people whose prints were similar enough to warrant a closer look by a human examiner. This is completely standard procedure. The database doesn't make identifications, it narrows a haystack. A person still has to look at the needles. One of those candidates, fourth on the list, was Brandon Mayfield, an attorney in Portland, Oregon, with no connection to Spain, no passport indicating recent travel there, and no history of terrorism. Fingerprint identification follows ACE-V. First, analysis, examine the unknown print. Next, comparison, match features point by point. Then, evaluation, decide if the similarities are sufficient. Finally, verification. A second examiner reviews it blind. An FBI examiner compared the Madrid print to Mayfield's prints on file and reported finding numerous matching ridge characteristics, enough in the examiner's judgment to call it a positive identification. A second examiner reviewed the comparison and agreed. Then a third examiner, brought in specifically because of the case's importance, reviewed it independently and also confirmed the match. 3 trained experts, using an established verification protocol, all reached the same conclusion. But consensus can be an illusion. Verification only works when it is truly independent, blind to prior conclusions, free from subtle cues, and disciplined against overconfidence. And this is the detail that makes the case so important to forensic science. The system's built-in safeguard against a single examiner's mistake, independent verification, failed completely, not because the protocol was skipped, but because something was affecting all 3 examiners at once. Here's what makes this case a genuine story of institutional failure, not just a technical one. The FBI wasn't working in a vacuum. The Spanish National Police, who had the original print and far more direct familiarity with the case, examined the same comparison independently. Spanish examiners told the FBI, before Mayfield's arrest, that they didn't believe the print matched him. The FBI's response was to send its own examiner to Spain to press the point, and to remain confident in the identification. Mayfield was placed under covert surveillance, and eventually arrested and held for 2 weeks as a material witness, based on an identification that the people closest to the original evidence had already questioned. That sequence, outside experts raising a red flag and the identifying agency doubling down instead of pausing, is the moment forensic reviewers would later focus on most. A single wrong match is a technical error. Dismissing a credible external challenge to that match is a process failure. So how do 3 trained experts, using a real verification process, all reach the same wrong conclusion? The Department of Justice's own internal investigation gave this phenomenon a name that's now central to how forensic science understands its own risks: confirmation bias. Let's break down what that means in practice. Fingerprint conclusions aren't strictly yes or no. Real latent prints are often messy and partial, so examiners must apply careful judgment before calling similarities meaningful. Fingerprint comparison isn't always a clean binary of matches or doesn't match. Latent prints, the partial smudged impressions recovered from real crime scenes, are often incomplete or distorted. Examining one requires judgment, deciding which ridge features are genuinely present versus which might be an artifact of the print's poor quality. The investigation found that once the first examiner believed he'd found a match, that belief shaped how the print was read. Ambiguous features that could have gone either way got interpreted in the direction that supported the existing conclusion. And because the case involved a suspected terrorist attack, with enormous institutional and public pressure to find an answer, that pull toward confirmation was stronger still. Examiners rechecked the same ridges, labeling ambiguous shapes as matches, each mark nudging the story towards certainty. That feedback loop grew confidence faster than proof, setting up the misstep that followed. Once a conclusion takes hold, ambiguous features tend to align with it. Only strict procedures and skepticism keep interpretation from bending toward what we expect to see. That growing certainty outpaced the actual evidence, making it worse. The independent verifications weren't fully independent in practice. The second and third examiners knew a colleague had already called it a match before they conducted their own review. Reviewing a comparison while already told what the answer is supposed to be isn't the same as reviewing it cold, and the investigation concluded this context likely primed each subsequent examiner to see what they expected to find. The Inspector General's review also found something that forensic science tries hardest to guard against: outside information bleeding into what's supposed to be an objective technical comparison. Mayfield was a Muslim convert who had previously done legal work for a man later convicted on terrorism-related charges. Investigators were aware of this background before the fingerprint conclusion was finalized. That context had no scientific bearing on whether ridge patterns matched, but the federal review found it likely reinforced the examiner's confidence in a conclusion that should have been reached and challenged using the print evidence alone. This is precisely why forensic best practice calls for linear sequential unmasking. Examiners should be shielded from irrelevant case details that could unconsciously nudge a supposedly neutral scientific comparison toward a predetermined answer. The case only fell apart because the actual source of the print was eventually identified. Spanish investigators, continuing their own work independently of the FBI's conclusion, matched the latent print to an Algerian national with documented ties to the bombing. Confronted with an alternative suspect whose print matched by every measure the FBI's own had failed, the Bureau withdrew its identification. Mayfield was released, and the U.S. government later paid a $2 million settlement along with a formal apology. The correction notably didn't come from inside the system that made the error. It came from an outside party who kept investigating rather than accepting the first confident answer. So, what should we learn? Doubt is a safeguard, and independence prevents consensus from hardening into error. Vigilance, not certainty, keeps science from misleading us. The Mayfield case became one of the most closely studied failures in the history of forensic science, not because the underlying technique of fingerprint comparison is invalid, but because it revealed something uncomfortable about any forensic discipline that depends on human judgment. A method can be scientifically sound and still produce a false certainty if the people applying it are unconsciously shaped by what they already expect, or want, to find. In the years since, the case has driven real reform: blind verification protocols, deliberate efforts to shield examiners from irrelevant case context, and a broader, more cautious language in court about what a fingerprint match can and can't prove. The fingerprint didn't lie. 3 trained people quite sincerely believed it was telling them something it never actually said.